Hello friends, we are going to learn about the French Revolution today, which is the easiest and the most important part of history. In this video, we'll look at three things. Firstly, the storming of Bastille that kicked off the French Revolution. Secondly, the system of the French society that existed during that time. And thirdly, the rise of revolutionary ideas that makes French Revolution the most important part of history. So firstly, the storming of Bastille. How did it all start? It all started on 14 July 1789 when people of Paris heard a rumor that the king had demanded his troops to go into the city and open fire on the people of Paris. Now the people got angry. Around 7,000 men and women gathered in front of the town hall and formed what was called People's Militia. That is their own army against the government. They stormed government buildings, broke into them, searching for any kind of weapon the government would have hidden. Most importantly, they stormed the Bastille, which was a prison located in the eastern side of the city. In the armed fight that followed, the people ended up killing the commander of Bastille and released the 7 prisoners that were imprisoned in Bastille. So why was this hatred towards Bastille? Because the people hated the king during that time. Understand that France was an autocracy. The king didn't listen to people, taxed the people a lot, and thus the people hated the king. And Bastille represented the despotic power of the king, and thus this anger towards Bastille. So let's look at how the French society was structured during that time. So understand, friends, that Louis XVI, who was only 20 years old by the way, had ascended the throne. Years of war had emptied the treasury, and there was a cost of maintaining the palace of Versailles. Plus French had just helped 13 American colonies to gain independence from Britain. Also, France was in a billion levels of debt already. Now, what happened further was that since the government wasn't paying its money back, the lenders started to tax the government extra. They increased 10% of interest. Now, the French government needed money, so they started to tax the people. But the problem was that they taxed only a section of the society, and this was the poorest section. So understand, friends, that during that time, France was divided into 3 sections, into 3 estates as it was called. The first estate was the clergy, second estate was the nobility, and the third estate was the estate that formed the majority of population, including the poorest sections of the society. Peasants formed around 90% of the population, and surprisingly, they didn't own most of the land that they cultivated. Around 60% of the land was owned by the minority of the population, that is the nobles, the church, and the richer members of the third estate. The members of the first 2 estates had further privileges. Firstly, they were exempted from taxes, and secondly, they had feudal privileges. Those are the privileges that were given to them simply because they were a part of that estate. So the peasants had to work in their homes, were of service to them simply because those people belonged to the clergy and the nobility. The church also extracted its own taxes from the people apart from the government. So the church had direct taxes and the indirect taxes. During all of this, there was the struggle to survive. So French population rose from 23 million to 28 million between 1715 and 1789. But the problem was that the production of food could not keep up with the demand that increased because of the rise in population. What happened was that the price of bread increased and the gap between the rich and the poor widened. This caused the subsistence crisis. That is, the basic means of livelihood of a chunk of the society was endangered. During this time, we saw what was the growth of the middle class or the bourgeoisie as we call them now. So the peasants had no means to start a revolution simply because they did not have the money, and neither did they have the education that brought the new ideas into the minds of the people. So during this time, the industrial revolution took place, and we witnessed the emergence of social group called the middle class that earned their wealth through overseas trade. This section of the society also included lawyers and administrative officials. Now, these were educated people, and they believed that no group in society should be privileged by birth. They believed that the social position of a person should be based solely on the basis of merit, on how knowledgeable that person is or how much that person can contribute towards the society. The new ideas emerged during that time. The society should be based on freedom and equal laws was what people believed. This period witnessed the rise of two important and legendary philosophers during that time, John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. So a number of books were written during that time that influence us till date. In his book, Two Treatises of Government, John Locke opposes the doctrine of divine and the absolute right of the monarch. This idea was carried forward by Rousseau, who believed that the government should be based on a social contract between people and their representatives. Understand that this was the emergence of the idea of democracy. In his Spirit of Laws, Montesquieu proposed the division of power within the government, that is the legislative, executive and the judiciary branches, a system that we follow till date. These ideas were revolutionary. This idea was put into force in USA during that time from the 13 American colonies that had just gained independence. Now the American Constitution was formed, and this formed an important example for the political thinkers in France who had proposed these ideas in the first place. These ideas were discussed in saloons, in coffee houses, and spread through books and newspapers. Now, here came the news that Louis XVI was going to increase the taxes further. Now, these people who were armed with all these revolutionary ideas, who were already under the subsistence crisis, got angry, and the French Revolution got kicked off. This is how the legendary French Revolution began. I hope, friends, you would like this video. Do check the next videos to find out what happened in the French Revolution and to complete this chapter. If you like this video, please like and subscribe.